Hello and welcome to this lecture. So, in our today's lecture, we are going to focus on regional dialects. Now, before we begin, I would like to ask you, what is your understanding of dialect? So, what do you understand by dialect? Can anyone please give me the definition of dialect? Anyone? Just try to remember the definition of language. Then you try to find out the definition of dialect. Who can say it?
So dialects is a native language.
Language itself is a native language. For example, Bangla is my native language. Yeah, particular.
A particular form of language.
So what is your understanding of the particular form of language?
Social group.
Okay, which is?
That is a specific region or social group.
Specific region or social group, okay. Anything else? Yeah, you're quite close. Dialect actually it is used by a particular group of people in a certain community. It can be used by a specific group of people in a specific area, geographic area. And also dialect can be used by a community, right? And dialect has its own features. Can you tell me what kind of features actually we can find in the dialects? What are the things? I mean, commonly found things in the dialect. Is it always like the language? Or can a dialect be regarded as a language? Can
Sometimes regarded as language. Dialect.
Sometimes, okay, it can be regarded as a language, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and how does it happen?
When sir higher class people use it, or any literature written by it,
Okay.
or any then any dialects will be the higher class language.
Anything else? We studied the standardization, right?
Right, sir.
So we have seen that in a standardization, how certain kind of dialects, how actually they are standardized as a language, right?
Right, sir.
So if a dialect, it has a grammar and also dictionaries for that particular dialect, and also the literature, exactly. Then all these things will contribute to the, to the formation of a language, or you can see it as you can see the recognition, to get the recognition as a language. So that dialect, if all these things are there, if these conditions are met, then we can say that that dialect, it has become a language. And obviously people in the power, who are in the higher status in the society, usually they are responsible for this. That means they will uh, decide, especially the academician and also people in the power, politically or economically or education wise. So they will decide that whether they are going to regard it as a dialect. This dialect as a language. So it also depends on the people in the power. Okay. All right. Now you can see the dialect. Now we are going to talk about regional dialect. So far we have understood what is dialect is. Now you can see in the first slide, it says that regional variation in the way a language is spoken is likely to provide one of the easiest ways of observing variety in language. So the regional variation, for example, in our parts of the world, and especially in our part of Bangladesh, we have seen that in different parts of the Bangladesh, they are using different kinds of dialectal variation. So these regional variation, that will help us to observe the variety in language, right? For example, especially in Feni or Noakhali, Lokipura, they have a different kinds of dialects, and their dialects are they're not same, just like the other parts of Bangladesh. And even in the southern part of Bangladesh, especially Khulna, Joshua, Shatkhira, in Jinaida, if you go to these places, then you'll find that their dialect is different. And even in northern part of Bangladesh, the part actually where we are staying now, you can see that our dialect is different. So it helps us to observe the different kinds of varieties in the same language, right? Understood what I'm saying?
Right, sir.
Okay. So regional variety, it helps us to observe languages based on the region. অঞ্চল ভিত্তিকভাবে ভাষাগুলোকে এগুলোকে গবেষণা করতে, এগুলো নিয়ে ভাবতে, অবজার্ভ করতে আমাদেরকে সাহায্য করে, কারণ রিজনাল ভ্যারাইটি নিয়ে আমরা এই ভাষার যে বিভিন্ন গুণ সেগুলো নিয়ে আমরা আলোচনা করতে পারি। As you travel throughout a wide geographical area in which a language is spoken, and particularly if that language has been spoken in that area for many hundreds of years, you're almost certain to notice differences in pronunciation, in the choices and forms of words and its syntax. So just look at this. That is, when you're traveling throughout a wide geographical area in which a language is spoken. For example, if somebody comes to Bangladesh and if he travels throughout the country, then he will notice this, that the same Bangla, it is not spoken in the same way in all parts of the Bangladesh. So in the southern part, they'll have a different kinds of pronunciation and vocabulary syntax in some cases. And also in northern part, and also in the eastern part of Bangladesh, you will also notice these kind of changes or these kind of variations in language. So that's what it says that, and particularly if that language has been spoken in that area for many hundreds of years, you're almost starting to notice differences in pronunciation. So, did you meet any people from Feni, Lokipur, or Chittagong?
Yes, sir, from Chittagong.
And did you have the chance to listen to them? I mean, when they're actually having conversation over phone or even in person, when they're having conversation with people from the same area, you see, then and there they change their dialect. They don't use the usual or the standard Bangla. They use their dialect, and you see sometimes it's very difficult, especially from Chittagong. How many of you understand the dialect from Chittagong? তোমরা বুঝো চিটাগাংয়ের ডায়ালেক্টটা যখন চিটাগাংয়ের লোকরা কথা বলে? Yes, maybe one of the is from there. So sometimes I have noticed that when he's over phone, and this is very usual, that certainly he will use his dialect with his people from the same locality, so which is quite natural. Okay, so sometimes when he talks over phone, I don't understand anything, because that sounds very difficult for me, because of the pronunciation, it gets very difficult, and your understanding of that language actually gets hindered or obstacled. Okay. All right, syntax and words, they're also different. Now, in the next slide, there may even be very distinctive local colorings in the language, which you notice as you move from one location to another. So you see the distinctive local colorings in the language. Actually, you have to be very careful that when we are moving from the very basic discussion of the sociolinguistics and different kinds of theories of the sociolinguistics, from there actually we're moving to the very advanced kind of analysis of the sociolinguistics, and which are very important. Especially for our understanding of the sociolinguistics and different issues regarding sociolinguistics. So here we see the regional dialect we're talking about. Then afterwards, you can find that when you will have a good understanding of it, then we'll jump to another new chapter, or it is a new topic, which is the Pidginization and Creolization. We call it a Pidgin and Creole language. So these are also two important languages that we're going to talk about. So try to understand this regional dialect and the variety. So you see distinctive local colorings. So if you go to Noakhali, so you'll see that the people from Noakhali, the way they pronounce or the vocabulary they use, if you go to Feni or Lokipur, almost same. Their dialect is very close. You can call them sisters dialect, but still there are some differences. Okay, so the Lokipur people from Lokipur, people from Feni, and people from Noakhali, actually, though they are using the same dialect, but still, because of their geographical distances and differences, you can find some kind of variations in their dialect. So that's why it says that the distinctive local colorings. That means you can see the difference. You can see the differences between or among the dialects, and you can observe it. That is very distinct. So in the language, which you notice as you move from one location to another location, such distinctive varieties are usually called regional dialects of the language. So what is regional dialects then? Huh? What is regional dialect? The regional dialect is, it's based on location. So from one location to another location, we have the same language, actually it changes its color. That means the vocabulary, pronunciation, and even syntax sometimes in some cases. So that is you can say the characteristics. These are the characteristics of regional dialect. I hope you understand it. Okay, so as I was saying, now you see, as we saw earlier, the term dialect is sometimes used only if there is a strong tradition of writing in the local variety. So you see, we call it a dialect if there is a writing system. Then we call it a dialect. Old English and to a lesser extent, Middle English had dialects in this sense. So in the Old English and also in the Middle English, so you can see they have the written form, and that's why actually we're calling them dialect. So this is, you can say it's one of the preconditions that dialect is very close to language. It itself is a language, but it is not a standard. It is not accepted or recognized as a standard language. But still you can see in dialects, books are written. Lots of things are written in dialects. Okay, so here it says that this is one of the preconditions that if you want to consider a variety of a language, if you want to consider it as a dialect, then it should have a, something written in that dialect. Then you can call it dialect. But the regional dialect, you can see, it's based on the locality, geographical, existence or situations. So in the absence of such a tradition of writing, the term patois may be used to describe the variety. Remember, what is that actually we are calling it, that is patois or patois, the way you pronounce it is okay because it's a French word. So the term patois, so you see, we will call it a patois, a dialect patois when there is no written form. Understood?
Yes, sir.
In the absence of such a tradition of writing, the term patois may be used to describe the variety. Absence. কোনো একটা ডায়ালেক্ট, সেটাকে যদি আমরা ল্যাঙ্গুয়েজ ভ্যারাইটি হিসেবে ধরি, আর সেই ডায়ালেক্টের যদি কোনো লিখিত রূপ না থাকে, ওই ভাষায় যদি কোনো বই পুস্তক লেখা না হয়, ডিকশনারি না থাকে, তখন ওইটাকে ডায়ালেক্ট না বলে আমরা ফ্রেঞ্চ ওয়ার্ড ব্যবহার করছি, তার নাম হচ্ছে patois. Okay, so the differences between dialect and patois, you understand it now. Got it? এটা তো বারবার আসবে, এই কথাটা মনে রাখলে তখন গুলিয়ে ফেলবে যে কোনটা ডায়ালেক্ট কোনটা patois.
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right.
Yes,
now, however, many linguists writing in English tend to use dialect to describe both situations and rarely, if at all, use patois as a scientific term. But for many linguists, they think that patois and dialect, actually, they are not different. I mean, even if there is no written form, it's still we call patois. Okay, so they use this term patois rather for scientific use. Okay. কিছু sociolinguistics আছেন যারা প্যাটোইকে এইভাবে ডেমার্কেশন লাইন টানতে চান না, যে এটা ডায়ালেক্ট, এটা প্যাটোই, যেটা রিজন ফর্মে ওটাকে প্যাটোই বলবো, ওটাকে মানতে চান না। ওনাদের কাছে সবগুলোই সমান, ওনারা সবগুলো ইকুয়ালি জাস্টিফাই করে। ওকে, now you are likely to encounter it only as a kind of anachronism, as in its use by Jamaicans, who often refer to the variety of English spoken on the islands as a patois. So the Jamaican people living in Jamaican Islands, they use English and they call it English patois. Though they have written form, they are writing literature and other stuff. Even they have dictionaries in the Jamaican English, but still they are calling it patois. What we have learned just a few minutes back, that if there is no written, if there is nothing, any written thing in that particular language, like dictionary, literature, or some other things, if there is nothing, there is no written form, then we will call it a patois. But here you can see some people, especially people in the Jamaica, they say that though they have the written form, still they're calling it patois. So you see, patois and dialect, they can be used interchangeably. আমরা একটা জায়গা আরেকটাকে ব্যবহার করতে পারি চাই। So here you see, the dialect patois distinction actually seems to make more sense in some situations. This is the dialect patois distinction. A dialect এবং কোনটা patois, এই যে পার্থক্যটা দুইয়ের মধ্যে, এইটা আমরা কিছু সিচুয়েশন দিয়ে যদি ব্যাখ্যা করার চেষ্টা করি, তাহলে এটা আমাদের কাছে আরো স্পষ্ট। For example, France, then in others. So the situation of France, actually, we're going to learn now. It says that in medieval France, a number of languages flourished and several were associated with strong literary traditions. So see, number of languages flourished and several were associated with a strong literary tradition. So you see, there are lots of dialects, a variety of the same language, that they also had literary traditions. So that means they had written form, and lots of things are written in those dialects. However, as the language of Paris asserted itself from the 14th century on, these traditions withered. The Parisian French, which is regarded as the standard French. So the in Paris, so you can see that when this Parisian, you can say that the Parisian dialect, when it has been established as the standard French language, then it says that the 14th century, and it happened in the 14th century and on, that means still is going on, these traditions withered. That means the patois, even if you don't have a written form, then you can call it a patois. So these patois thing, it disappeared from the tradition, as the traditions withered. Because Parisian French actually, it get the prominence. Okay, it became very much prevalent throughout the whole France. So Parisian French is spread throughout France, and even though that spread is still not yet complete, it drastically reduced the importance of the local varieties. So you see, still it is going on. The process is going on. The Parisian French is still actually, it is creating its influence. On the minds of the French people. So lots of French people from different other provinces and regions, they're also embracing it. They're learning, or at least they're trying to use Parisian French. Okay, and as a result, the other varieties besides these Parisian French actually was in the capital city. That's why actually it gets the prominence. But on the other hand, the other dialects or variations, they couldn't survive. They disappeared. Not all of them, some of them disappeared. And you can see, here it says, it's drastically reduced the importance of the local varieties. That is, some of the varieties, they lost their importance. They continue to exist largely in a spoken forms only. They are disfavored socially and politically. They are merely better to those who extol the virtues of a standard French. However, even as these varieties have faded, there have been countervailing moves to revive them, as many younger residents of the area in which they are spoken see them as strong indicators of the identities they wish to preserve. So this is very interesting, picture. Here you can see. That is the distinction between patois and also the dialect. It became very much crucial and also very much critical at that time in France. And it's still, that kind of difference is going on. Here you see, they are disfavored socially and politically. That means other dialects, except Parisian dialect, other dialects of the French language, they were not given importance, they are not respected, and those languages were not taken care of, because people living in the Paris, they are the politicians, they are the powerful people in the country. So they control the whole situation. So they are disfavored socially and politically. So these people living in the outer skirts of the city, or even you can see that they're living in the bordering area, or in the quite a distance they're living. That is distant from Paris, that is the capital city of France. What is happening that those languages actually they were disfavored, and some of them actually they are vanished. People are not using them. Still, some people actually they're using those varieties in France. However, even as these varieties have faded means মিলিয়ে যাওয়া, এই ভ্যারাইটিগুলো শুধুমাত্র প্যারিসিয়ান ভ্যারাইটি ছাড়া, প্যারিসিয়ান ডায়ালেক্ট ছাড়া বাকি ডায়ালেক্টগুলো আস্তে আস্তে সেগুলো কি হারিয়ে যেতে থাকলো, ফেড হয়ে গেল, অদৃশ্য হয়ে গেল, মলিন হয়ে যাচ্ছে, সেই ভ্যারাইটিগুলো নিয়ে আর মানুষ কাজ করছে না. There have been countervailing moves to revive them, as many as younger residents of the area in which they are spoken see them as strong indicators of identities they wish to preserve. So as you can see that people living in the cities, so you can see there have been countervailing moves to revive. So those who are actually not, there are some people, a group of people actually, they didn't like the idea that the Parisian French, it will be regarded as the original or authentic or the standard one. So some group of people, some community, they tried to revive some communities tried to revive their own dialect. Okay, especially while they're speaking with one another, while actually they're having conversation or discourse, just like this. And also, it is a kind of a strong indicator of the identities, because young people, they are encouraged to use those varieties, the other French language varieties, rather than the Parisian varieties. And they found it, or they took it as a proclamation of their identity. They declared their identity with the use of their own dialect. Do you follow me, dear students? Have you understood what I'm saying?
Yes, sir. So the people are politically powerful, so they can.
Yes. সিচুয়েশনটা এরকম যে ওরা নিজেদের ডায়ালেক্টটার ব্যবহার একসময় করতো না, কিন্তু কি করেছে, প্যারিশিয়ান ডায়ালেক্টটা সব ফলো করার চেষ্টা করছে। কিন্তু এট ওয়ান পয়েন্ট ইয়াং জেনারেশন থেকে শুরু করে সিনিয়রদের তাদের একটা ধারণা যে আমরা যদি আমাদের ডায়ালেক্টের ব্যবহার না করি তাহলে আমাদের আইডেন্টিটি নষ্ট হয়ে যাবে। আমি ফ্রান্সের কোন জায়গা থেকে এসেছি এটা একটা ইম্পর্টেন্ট বিষয়। So they have this feeling for their land, for their home. So that's why they want to revive the language. And the young people, when actually they're using this language, they found it it's a matter of prestige. And also they found it that they are preserving their identity. অর্থাৎ ওই ভাষায় কথা বলে ইয়াংরা বিশ্বাস করতো যে আমরা আমাদের আইডেন্টিটিটাকে রক্ষা করছি এই ভাষা ব্যবহারে।
Yes, sir.
Now, there are some further interesting differences in the use of the terms dialect and patois. Patois is usually used to describe only rural forms of speech. See, we may talk about an urban dialect, but to talk about an urban patois seems strange. So people used to call the local dialects as patois. So it's quite derogatory. Sometimes it's humiliating. So that's why you can see the people who are living in so in France, people who are living in different rural areas, so their language or their dialect or the variation, it has been regarded as substandard. And that's why we talk about an urban dialect. So you can heard about urban dialect. For example, even in our Dhaka, you see that Dhaka, it has its own dialect, it has its own forms of language, and which is considered to be the standard one. And you will find that some people very much intentionally, they try to use the urban dialect so that they can identify themselves as one of the urbanites or people living in the urbans. It's a matter of prestige. On the other hand, if you fail to use the urban or the standard dialect or the variety of the language, what happens then? Then you will be regarded in the society as a person who is substandard, uneducated, and you will lose your face and prestige in front of the other people. So we always actually, we hear about the urban dialect, but we never hear about that is urban patois. Let me give you the example from our day-to-day life. For example, if any one of you use your dialect, and when you're traveling to Dhaka, and if you're in Dhaka, especially in the educated forum, in educated platform, and if you use your own dialect, that is dialect from Dinajpur, Rangpur, or Bogora, if you keep talking or using that language, I'm quite sure that actually you're not going to be regarded as an educated person or the up-to-date one, or as a person who is modern or urban. In Bengali we call them cat লোকজন তারা ব্যবহার করছে কি যে তারা গ্রাম্য ভাষা ব্যবহার করছে। তো যেটা দেখা গেছে যে ফ্রান্সের সিচুয়েশনে যে আরবান ডায়ালেক্ট নামে ব্যাপারটা আছে, কিন্তু প্যাটোয়া ডায়ালেক্ট বা গ্রাম্য ডায়ালেক্ট বলে এইটা কিন্তু তারা কখনো বলে না যে এটা আরবান প্যাটোয়া এরকম কথা। That's like a derogatory, and sometimes it's pejorative term that people they don't actually accept this patois. If you use that patois, I mean that particular dialect or variety, I mean you will not be respected in the society, so they will look down upon you. Do you understand what I'm saying, dear students? Do you follow?
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right. All right, then we'll move on to our discussion. Now here you see, patois seems to refer only to the speech of the lower strata in society. It's the lower strata of society. Again, we may talk about a middle-class dialect, but not apparently about a middle-class patois. So you see, people who are using patois, or we can say the গ্রাম্য ভাষা বা গ্রামের যে ডায়ালেক্ট, আমাদের লোকাল ডায়ালেক্ট যখন ব্যবহার করা হচ্ছে, আরবান ডায়ালেক্ট ব্যবহার না করে, so you see they are regarded as the people from the lower strata, মানে সমাজের নিচু স্তর থেকে আসছে এরা, এরকম ধারণা করা হবে। And we may talk about a middle class dialect, but not apparently about a middle class patois. So you can also hear about the middle class. You can hear about the middle class patois, middle class dialect. মধ্যবিত্তের জন্য আবার একটা ডায়ালেক্ট আছে যেটা মধ্যবিত্ত শ্রেণী তাদের মধ্যে ব্যবহার করে থাকে। উচ্চবিত্তদের কথোপকথন, তাদের আচার আচরণ অনেকটা ডিফারেন্ট থাকে। আর মধ্যবিত্তের জন্য তাদের নিজস্ব একটা ডায়ালেক্ট আছে, বিশেষ করে শিক্ষিত সমাজরা তারা একটু অন্যরকম করে কথা বলে। ঠিক এটা ধনিক শ্রেণীর সাথে তাদের ভাষাটা অনেক সময় কিন্তু মেলে না, কারণ ফিনান্সিয়াল স্ট্যাটাসের কারণে এটা ভাষাটাকে দারুণভাবে প্রভাবিত করে। কিন্তু তুমি মিডল ক্লাস ডায়ালেক্ট শুনলো, মিডল ক্লাস প্যাটোয়া শুনবা, বুঝতে পারছো কি বলছি? সুতরাং প্যাটোয়াই আর প্যাটোয়া এটা সম্পূর্ণরূপে কাদের জন্য বরাদ্দ থাকছে? গ্রামের মানুষ যারা শহরে থাকে না, আরবানের বাইরে যারা আছে তাদের জন্য এই ভাষাটি থাকছে। Do you follow what I'm saying?
Yes, sir. Urban.
Yes, okay, sir.
All right. So So you can see that now we can say that there is no middle class patois. We don't see that. Now, finally, a dialect usually has a wider geographical distribution than a patois. So that whereas regional dialect and village patois seem unobjectionable, the same cannot be said for regional patois and village dialect. So, however, as I indicated above, that means the writer himself, he is saying that that is Ronald Waldo. He's saying that the many Jamaicans refer to the peculiar spoken variety of Jamaican English as a patois rather than as a dialect. So again, the distinction is in no way an absolute one. So you can see it's overlapping. The difference between dialect and patois, it's overlapping. Sometimes you can say that this is my dialect. Sometimes you can say, no, that is a patois. For example, I can say the people who are using Feni or Lokipur, that dialect, I can say that is a village patois. It's not Avan. So I can ignore that, or I can have a very negative feeling about that language, or I can say negative outlook about that language. But for them, that is a dialect. Do you get my point, what I'm saying?
Yes, sir.
When I'm considering from my perspective as an Avanite, একজন শহরী হিসেবে যখন আমি ফেনীর ল্যাঙ্গুয়েজকে দেখি তখন সেটা আমার কাছে প্যাটোয়া, কিন্তু ফেনীর লোক তো পুরো ফেনীতে ওটা ইউজ করছে, পুরো একটা রিজিয়নে ব্যবহার করছে, তো ওটা তো একটা রিজিয়নাল ডায়ালেক্ট। আমি কি তোমাদেরকে বোঝাতে পারলাম বিষয়টা? হ্যালো,
Yes, sir.
talk to me. If you don't respond, আমি তো কনফিউজড হয়ে যাব। বুঝতে পারছো কি বলছি? যে এটা আসলে পার্সপেক্টিভের ব্যাপার, কে কিভাবে দেখছে। তারপরে লিঙ্গুইস্টরা কি করছে, এটা একটা ডেফিনিশন দাঁড় করানোর চেষ্টা করছে, এটা বলছে অ্যাবসলিউট একটা ডেফিনিশন দাঁড় করানো খুব কঠিন, যে the distinction between dialect and the patois, it's very difficult. So I'm reading it again, just try to focus on it. Finally, a dialect usually has a wider geographical distribution than a patois. So dialect, it is used by a large group of people and wider geographical distribution. For example, in Feni, Lokipur, in some parts of the Chittagong, so they have the same kind of dialect. So you see, wider geographical distribution. মানে এই ভৌগোলিকভাবে অনেক জায়গাতে ব্যবহৃত হয় একটা ভাষা, কিন্তু এটা অরিজিনাল স্ট্যান্ডার্ড ভাষা না, ডায়ালেক্ট ব্যবহৃত। তখন আমরা ওটাকে বলছি কি হচ্ছে ডায়ালেক্ট, ওকে, সেটাকে ডায়ালেক্ট বলছে। সেটা প্যাটোয়া, আমরা তখন প্যাটোয়া হচ্ছে আরো বেশি স্থানীয় একটা কমিউনিটি, একটা গ্রামের ভাষা হতো, একটা নির্দিষ্ট মনে করো একটা ইউনিয়নে 4-5টা গ্রাম আছে, কোনো একটা গ্রামে ব্যবহৃত হচ্ছে, ওটাকে আমরা প্যাটোয়া বলছি, সেটাকে ডায়ালেক্ট বলছি। কিন্তু ওই সবগুলো প্যাটোয়া মিলিয়ে দেখবি তার মধ্যে একটা কমন একটা ব্যাপার থাকে। যেমন ধরো দিনাজপুরে কি আছে এখানে?
আমি আছি।
What's your name, please?
Sir, Prema.
Okay, Prema. And fine, you're from Rangpur, right? Fine? Fine, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, fine. How many thanas or upajelas do you have here? কয়টা থানা উপজেলা আছে? তুই একটা নাম বলতে পারবে? 2-3টা উপজেলার নাম বলতে পারবে রংপুরের?
উপজেলা স্যার?
হ্যাঁ, উপজেলা, তুই একটা উপজেলার নাম বলতো।
স্যার, রংপুর, দিনাজপুর।
এগুলো কি উপজেলা? দিনাজপুর, সৈয়দপুর। বুঝতে পেরেছি, কনফিউজ হয়ে গেছে। যেমন ধরো আমরা এখানে নীলফামারী গেছি, সৈয়দপুর একটা উপজেলা, এরকম আরো ধরো 2-1টা উপজেলা আছে। এখন দেখা যাচ্ছে সৈয়দপুর উপজেলার জন্য একটা নিজস্ব একটা ভাষার মতো আছে, ওইটা আবার আরেক উপজেলায় গেলে মিলছে। তাহলে এই যে উপজেলা থেকে উপজেলার যে পার্থক্য, একই কিন্তু ডাইরেক্ট কিন্তু একই রকম, কিন্তু ভৌগোলিক ডিফারেন্সের জন্য এদের ভাষাগত সামান্য কিছু উচ্চারণগত বা ভোকাবুলারি সামান্য চেঞ্জ আসছে। তাহলে ওইটা হচ্ছে ওই এলাকার প্যাটার্ন। আর আমি যখন সমস্ত নীলফামারী জেলার সমস্ত উপজেলাকে একসাথে কনসিডার করবো, তখন হয়ে যাবে এই সমস্ত প্যাটার্ন মিলে হচ্ছে একটা ডায়ালেক্ট। এবার কি বোঝা গেছে না বোঝা যায়নি? আমি একটু হাই হলো বড় আমি
উপজেলা,
তোমরা বুঝতে পারছো?
এক উপজেলার মধ্যে অনেক মিল আছে।
কিন্তু দেখো উপজেলা থেকে তো একটা ডিসটেন্স আছে,
ডায়ালেক্ট পুরো।
এখানে স্থানীয় যেগুলো একদমই খুবই লোকাল একটা গ্রাম ভিত্তিক যে ভাষা বা যে ডায়ালেক্টের মতো আমরা ওটাকে বলছি প্যাটোয়া। আর যখন সমস্ত প্যাটোয়াগুলো মিলে একসাথে যখন একটা ইউনিফর্ম একটা ল্যাঙ্গুয়েজের মতো দাঁড়ায়, একটা একই রকম প্রনাউন্সিয়েশন, একটা করে দাঁড়ায়, সবগুলোকে মিলে আমরা তখন সেটাকে বলছি আবার ডায়ালেক্ট। দিনাজপুরের লোকরা মোরালেস সব একই রকম করে কথা বলে, এটা ডায়ালেক্ট। দিনাজপুরের বিভিন্ন উপজেলায় গেলে দেখবে ওই ডায়ালেক্টের একটু ভ্যারিয়েশন আছে, একটু পার্থক্য আছে, কিন্তু মোরালেস there are some differences in pronunciation and also in vocabulary. So as you can see, so that whereas regional dialect and village patois seem unobjectionable, so regional dialect, it is unobjectionable. People don't talk about it, they don't object. তাদের এটা কোনো অভিযোগ নেই, ঠিক আছে, regional dialect একটা রিজিয়নে সবাই বলছে। ফর এক্সাম্পল বগুড়া রিজিয়ন ধরে সবাই একই রকম ডায়ালেক্টে কথা বলে, দিনাজপুর রিজিয়নে সবাই একই রকম ডায়ালেক্ট। আবার ওই রিজিয়নে ভাগ ভাগ করে গ্রাম ভিত্তিক ভাবে যেটা বলছে ওটা ভিলেজ প্যাটোয়া ধরছি, এটা unobjectionable. The same cannot be said for regional patois or village dialect. Village dialect বা regional patois যেরকম বলা যায়, যখন regional patois বলি তখন পুরো একটা রিজিয়নে সবাই একটা ল্যাঙ্গুয়েজে কথা বলে, তখন অ্যাপ্রিশিয়েটেড হয় না, অবজেকশন। তারপর কথা হচ্ছে কি, আমাদের কথা এখানে যেটা আমরা বলছিলাম যে since this definition actually not something absolute and sometimes they overlap, so that's why they're saying that any fixed definition for the dialects and patois or any fixed differences between these two, it's really difficult to find, and sometimes both of them they're same, the patois and dialects they're same. Okay, now I'll move on to the next slide. Now here this use of the term dialect to differentiate among regional varieties of specific languages is perhaps more readily applicable to contemporary conditions in Europe and some other developed countries than it would have been in middle or Renaissance Europe today in certain other parts of the world. So you see the dialect, this term dialect to differentiate among regional varieties, specific languages, perhaps more readily applicable to contemporary conditions in Europe.
Sir,
in Europe, yes, please. Yes.
Sir, আপনার কথা মানে ক্লিয়ার আসতেছে না মানে
All right, so here you can see that is that in Europe, I mean, if you take the situation of contemporary conditions of Europe, if you consider it, then you'll find that the term dialect and to differentiate among dialect and the regional varieties, it is more applicable. That is very much distinct and observing. এটা তুমি দেখে বুঝতে পারবে এবং এই ডিস্টিংশনটা ইউরোপের কিছু কিছু লিঙ্গুইস্টিক ফিনোমেনাল বা কন্ডিশন আছে সেইখানে তুমি এটা এই দুটোর মধ্যে পার্থক্য করতে পারবে তার যেমন রিজিওনাল ভ্যারাইটিসের মধ্যে তুমি ডিফারেন্স খুঁজে পাবে মানে তখন এটা ওখানে অ্যাপ্লিকেবল আমাদের এই থিওরিটা লিঙ্গুইস্টিক্স থিওরিটা আমরা চেষ্টা করছি যে রিজিওনাল ডায়ালেক্ট সেটা সেখানে আমরা প্রয়োগ করব because it's observable. And some of the developed countries, and also it is found in some of the developed countries like USA, like Canada, developed countries. Then it would have been in medieval or Renaissance Europe or today in certain other parts of the world. So in the Renaissance period or medieval period in Europe, it would have been impossible or difficult to find the distinction or to establish the distinction between dialect and the regional varieties of the patois. But today it's possible. So while it was possible to travel long distances and by making only small changes in this speech from location to location, continue to communicate with the inhabitants. So you see, when it was possible, and still is possible to travel long distances. So you can travel in long distances. These days, actually, it's easy to travel from one part of the country to another part of the country, or you can say one part of the world to another part of the world. So we can move. For example, you can use plane, you can use different other mode of communications to reach your destination. So that's you can see that it's. I mean, in these days, this kind of most of transportation is that it has made it very easy for us to to commute from one, to move from one place to another place. So as a result, we can travel and we can try to find the distinction between different kinds of regional varieties. It's possible, but earlier it wasn't possible because people couldn't move from one place to another, and people didn't communicate that much. Only the inhabitants of a particular area they communicated. But now, see the mobility of the people. You can see it has become very easy. So people are moving from one part of the world to the other parts of the world. So as a result, this distinction to identify or to define the distinction between the dialect and the regional varieties of the patois, it has become very easy these days. So that's it says that it has been said that at one time a person could travel from the south of Italy to the north of France in this manner. So it is possible. I mean, using different kinds of mode of transportation, or you can travel by yourself, and then from it to France we can move anytime you want. Obviously, if you use the right kind of mode of transportation, and by actually you can find the difference and also you can understand. Okay, and you see that it is quite clear that such a person began the journey speaking one language and ended it speaking something entirely different. However, there was no one point at which change overall occurred. So you can see that people are moving from one place to another place. So began the journey speaking one language. So they are using, for example, I'm speaking of a language, for example, English. So I'm using English, and then I've traveled to another part of the English-speaking nation, another English-speaking nation, and I ended it speaking something entirely different. So I'm using mine one, or I'm trying to adopt their one, the place actually where I'm traveling to, or I'm staying at. So I'm trying to adopt their style, their register, their pronunciation, or maybe I'm using mine one without changing anything. So in either way, you can see there are changes, and it's only happening because of because the traveling from one place to another place, it has become very easy. So there was no point that the change over occurred, nor is there actually any way of determining how many intermediate dialect areas that person passed. So you cannot say that how many intermediate, that means in between, how many dialects actually he passed through. That means from one dialect to another dialect, how many he has. যেমন আমি তোমাদেরকে বলি, আমি ছিলাম ঢাকাতে, আগে ছিলাম খুলনাতে, এর আগে আবার আমি দেশের বাইরে ছিলাম, আবার দেশের বাইরে থেকে আবার অনেকদিন থাকবো, আবার দেশে ফিরে এসেছি। তো একটা জিনিস খেয়াল করি, আমি বিভিন্ন জায়গার ভাষা এবং বিভিন্ন ধরনের ভাষা এবং বিভিন্ন অ্যারাবিক ইংলিশ, বিভিন্ন দেশের ইংলিশ স্পিকারদের সাথে আমার দেখা হয়েছে abroad, and then I got influenced by their English also, and also I got influenced by the Bangla language used by different Bangladeshi people from different parts of Bangladesh, those who are living abroad. Also now I'm staying here in the northern part of Bangladesh, in the northern Bangladesh, and you see there also I'm getting influenced by your language, by the local dance. Understood? So it's very difficult to determine that what kind of language actually, or the dialect, which kind of dialect I was influenced by. কোন ধরনের dialect দিয়ে কতবার চেঞ্জ হয়েছে, কিভাবে আমার ল্যাঙ্গুয়েজ মডিফাইড হয়েছে, বা আমার dialect বা যে ভ্যারিয়েশনস যেটা আছে আমি ব্যবহার করি বাংলা, সেটা কিভাবে পরিবর্তিত হয়েছে, এটা জানা করা, it gets very difficult. Okay, for an intriguing empirical test of this idea, one using recent phonetic data from a continuum of Franconian dialects in the Netherlands. So actually there was a kind of you can say the experiments and the phonetic data. So they observe the person and they use his dialect, and also they to his pronunciation, and they observe it, and from the phonetic data they are trying to understand his continuum of Saxon and Franconian dialects. তার যে Saxon Franconian dialect যেটা ব্যবহার করছে কিভাবে চেঞ্জ হয়েছে উচ্চারণের কত দিক থেকে, কারণ সে বিভিন্ন জায়গায় গিয়েছে, কতটা পরিচিত হয়েছে সেটা তারা ডিটেক্ট করার চেষ্টা করছে, সে বিভিন্ন জায়গায় গিয়েছে এরকম কাউকে নিয়ে গবেষণা করা হচ্ছে। Now they conclude that the traveler perceives logical distance indirectly, and that there are unsharp borders between dialect areas. This is interesting. Traveler, that means Jatri, that the traveler perceives phonological distance indirectly. Perceives phonological distance indirectly means, the differences regarding pronunciation and also different other, you can say the phonological elements or the characteristics. So he perceives it that he changed it, but he couldn't understand it. And he found it that this is, it has been done indirectly, that is not direct. So perceives phonological distance indirectly. So he, as a traveler, maybe I don't understand that word actually really I'm getting affected by the dialect of that particular place where I'm staying now. So it is indirect. Sometimes you cannot understand it, but when you go for this kind of research work, then you can find that his phonological characteristics of the pronunciation or you can say the phonetical characteristics of situations, or you can see the traits of his life. It has been changed. It has been influenced by different other languages, and it has been changed a lot. And that there are unsharp borders between dialect areas. Unsharp borders, that is the border between different kinds of dialect areas, that is not sharp. That means he cannot differentiate that he got this position or he got this phonological traits from that area, and he got this the pronunciation or this kind of accent or this kind of pronunciation from that kind of area. You cannot determine that exactly or precisely. That is why it is called unsharp borders between dialect areas. It's very difficult to determine that from where my pronunciation actually it has got affected or changed in that way. Understood what I'm saying? Is it clear? Do you have any question? Do you have any question, dear students?
No, sir.
Okay, if you don't have any question, then I'm going to share it on my YouTube channel, so you can download it from there and watch it again and again. If you have any confusion, please let me know. Because if you watch the video, you can go through this, you can listen. You can listen to a discussion, today's discussion, also you can read the slides from there. So you can pause it, read the slides, and also listen to the lecture, and they can come up with problems, okay? So next time we'll try to answer it. All right?
All right, sir.
Hope so. I'd like to conclude today's session here. So thank you. Thank you again for your participation and also your cooperation. See you next time. Take care.